This is your Dummies guide to the situation going on in Ukraine. Now, this is part 2. Yesterday, I did a part 1. This is part 2. Just going to clarify a few things that I mentioned yesterday. And I'm going to talk about some interesting developments, as well as China and Russia relations. We're going to talk about all of it. Before we get into that, I think it's really interesting how the West, there's like smoke over there, and we're in DC. What the hell is that? Okay, it's clearly not anything, because I'm like right next to the White House. So like, I'm like, yo, what's the smoke? Wow, there are a lot of planes flying. Like, what's going on? I see smoke, I see planes. Nothing's gonna happen here in DC, we're good. No, don't worry. So I think it's really interesting how the West is kind of policing the language that Russia and China are using, because they're refusing to call this an attack. They're just calling it a military operation, right? And I think it's interesting because I saw this really funny, well, not funny, but I saw this like quote or this tweet. If country X sends soldiers and tanks to country Y without an invasion, what's it called? And this person responds, this is a very easy question. Depending on the country, if it's Russia, it is definitely an invasion. Examples, Georgia, Ukraine. If it is the US, it's a liberation. Examples, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Panama, Cuba, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. So many examples. So that's just the irony here, because I keep saying this, the US is not innocent. You know, the US uses language like liberation when it invades other countries. So let's really think about this. And I'm just coming here from Washington, D.C., objectively, U.S. citizen, but I am objective. I'm not taking sides here. I'm like, I'm being objective. So let's talk about this. First and foremost, I think people got a little bit confused in the last video when I was talking about Ukraine as the U.S. defending Ukraine as one of its own. I meant that metaphorically. Ukraine is not part of NATO at all. It's speculated that Ukraine is considering joining NATO. And actually, that's what started this beef in the first place.
And more than half of Ukrainians say that they'd be down to join the EU. 64% of them say that they would be cool joining NATO. Putin's demands for the summit were this. Number one, that NATO, which is this big military alliance between US, Canada, and Europe, stop expanding, meaning they don't let any new members in. Number two, that NATO withdraw all of their troops from anywhere in Eastern Europe. Basically, Putin is saying, I can veto any military cooperation or troops going between countries that have to do with Eastern Europe, the place that used to be the Soviet Union.
NATO was kind of like, well, what are you talking about? And that's kind of what spiraled this, because right now, as far as Putin is concerned, Ukraine is a part of Russia. You know, he actually wrote this essay. I'm going to put the article up right here. He wrote this essay, and in this essay, he just kind of poured his heart out, describing, you know, this situation as sort of the worst thing that has happened to Russia or to the Soviet Union, the division. And this division, in his eyes, was caused by Western forces. So it's like, you know, it's like, look, I think about this like Nigeria, right? And the way that like Nigeria is, we're not necessarily united, but look at how Western forces kind of, especially like the UK specifically, kind of like divided us with, manipulated us and used our cultural differences to further divide us. You think about the Hausas, Igbos, and the Yorubas, and think about that division. In a way, that kind of ethnic conflict is what the Soviet Union was facing. And in their eyes, it's like these Western forces came in and split us apart, and we need to get back together. Basically, what's happening here is Putin is like the toxic ex-boyfriend, like Kanye West, ex-husband, right? He really wants Kim Kardashian back. Ukraine. He's like, Kim, I want you back. And Kim is like, Ukraine. And she's like, yo, I just want a divorce. Like, just leave me alone. I just want a divorce. This is what is happening right now. And who is the US? Tracy Romulus. You know, Kanye is like, Tracy, stay out of this. Stop manipulating Kim Kardashian's mind. Leave me and my wife alone. And Tracy's like, yo, what did I do? And Pete Davidson is NATO. And he's like, yo, Kim, let's get together. Come on, babe. And she's like, yeah, I'm down. Please save me. Save me from Kanye, from Putin. Save me. And they're like, yo, Kim, come here. We'll save you. So let's talk about, Russia in general. How does Russia have the guts to do this? Russia's really like, the US has placed sanctions on Russia. The UK has placed sanctions. So many countries are playing sanctions, but clearly Russia has recently rebuilt ties with China and sort of like secured certain deals that ensures that Russia's pretty much bulletproof if they lose some of these deals from the US, or from these NATO countries. It's fine. Like, if you guys cut us off, that's fine. We still have these relationships with China. So between China and Russia, there's a lot of power there, right? There's a lot of power. And what is so interesting about China and Russia, these Eastern forces going against the West, what is so interesting about it is Russia has taken all its troops away from the Chinese border and placed them to focus on this Ukraine situation. And the Chinese government has sort of assured Putin that, look, we're going to let you do this. We're going to let you do this, and we're not going to cause any issues. And Putin met with President Xi a few weeks ago, and they really solidified their ties. Now, the media is drawing a lot of parallels between the situation in Ukraine and the situation in Taiwan. And just for a little brief understanding, Taiwan, similarly to Ukraine, is independent of China, left China, but the Chinese, as far as the Chinese are concerned, Taiwan is a part of China. And that's where that conflict is. So right now,
Chinese aircraft entered Taiwan's air defense zone on the same day that Russia attacked Ukraine. Today, Taiwan's defense ministry reported that 9 J-16 jets and 1 Y-8 reconnaissance plane flew over a Taiwan-controlled island. In response, Taiwan fighters were deployed to warn away the Chinese jets. China's foreign ministry dismissed concerns about tensions from the British Prime Minister. This week, Johnson said that there would be consequences for places like Taiwan if the West failed to support Ukraine's independence. China's foreign ministry responded, Taiwan is not Ukraine. Taiwan has always been an inalienable part of China. This is an indisputable legal and historical fact.
And so the Taiwanese government, they're looking at what's happening in Ukraine, and they have their, they have all their military ready for anything, if anything happens.
President Tsai Ing-wen of Taiwan, her statement yesterday on Wednesday, basically saying that we need to ramp up our defenses, was also a way of signaling to the public that Taiwan is, of course, watching the situation and very alert. People have been living in Taiwan under the threat of invasion from the Chinese Communist Party for decades. This is not new to them. The Chinese Communist Party has been sending warplanes towards Taiwan on a near daily basis. And so I think that what people here are thinking is that we just need to be cautious and alert, but also stay calm.
So why is this interesting, right? Because right now, the United States and NATO are completely distracted by Ukraine, and their goal is to solve that situation right now. But in the meantime, this gives China the opportunity to seize, if it wants to, I don't know if it's going to happen, but it gives China the opportunity to at least have a presence in Taiwan, because the US is not focused on that. But here's why this is a problem for the US, because if the US does not protect Taiwan, it's going to affect their relationships with a lot of Asian countries.
The US has officially committed to protect Taiwan through the Taiwan Relations Act. So on the one hand, you have a very strong US, European, Western response towards Russia and Putin over Ukraine, which some would argue sends a message to China that, look, don't do what Putin's doing. Look what's happening to Putin. On the other hand, you don't have a NATO equivalent in Asia. There isn't the same defense of at least other countries in the region as there is in Europe with Ukraine's neighbors.
Even though there is no NATO infrastructure here, I think, of course, the U.S. has been talking a lot about pivoting towards the Indo-Pacific, and it's been dedicating more resources to its security here. We should remember that Taiwan is very important for the US in terms of the first island chain. If Taiwan goes down, then that would be a huge threat to the United States. So in terms of its allies, Japan and the Philippines, and other allies in the Asia. And so I think that we should be looking at it a little bit differently.
If this thing unfolds in the way that it might, this might be a dramatic battle between the West and the East. Russia and China. Russia has the most nukes. China, we know, is like a massive economy and there's so much money. It could go into being Russia and China versus the Western countries, European countries. But here's the thing. China doesn't necessarily have the same agenda as Russia. Whilst they are unified in their, principles and their ideologies, both these countries want supreme domination, and that's where there could be conflict. As far as the Chinese government is concerned, they believe they should dominate and rule the world. This is also the mentality of Russia. This is exactly, it's very similar. But hey, the US also has that mentality. It's just not branded that way, is it? Right? The US has that mentality also. It's just branded as, it's okay when the US wants to do global domination, but if Russia does it, if China does it, well. But also at the end of the day, the US, you could say, the US doesn't abuse its people in the way that we hear about China abusing its people and Russia abusing its people. So, hey, at least if the US does dominate, it's not making people suffer. At least, I don't know. It's not branded as though it's making people suffer. Not in the way that China and Russia are doing. But it's all propaganda at the same time. We don't know what the Chinese are telling the Chinese people about the US, or the Russians are telling the Russian people about the US. We don't know. So it's all quite interesting. It's all quite dramatic. This thing is unfolding and getting juicier by the day. And I'm going to be here watching, seeing what's happening. And if there's any new news, I'm going to come out on here and give you my 2 cents. Anyway, yes, I'm trying to make this simple and edutainment. Or what's the adjective for edutainment? I don't know. Oh, yes, I'm trying to make this simple and educational, but also entertaining, edutainment. But even though I'm doing this, doesn't mean that I think it's funny. Like, this is a very serious situation, especially when you hear about the victims and what they're going through. It's really, really sad what is happening to the people in Ukraine, and my heart really goes out to them. But just because I'm trying to make this simple and easy for people to understand and adding some entertainment value doesn't mean I don't recognize the gravity of this situation. I really do. So please forgive me if I have offended you. Those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, all the above. My name is Kenim, and see you next time. Peace. Have you ever wondered why Beyonce has such a strong cult following? The Beehive go crazy over Beyonce. What about the Barbs? Nicki Minaj's fans go crazy over her. And then Justin Bieber, the Beliebers, they love him. Why do these musicians have such a strong cult following? And if you're an artist, how can you build a cult following? If you're a musician, this is for you. I have a free webinar. It's not one of those webinars that you have to sign up and you go through it. No, this is a free webinar. You click the link, you start watching it immediately. Free webinar. It's gonna walk you, tell you exactly. I'm not one of those people that's gonna waste your time. Straight to the point. It's gonna tell you exactly what you need to do to build an artist persona and help you take your career to the next level. So if you're serious and you really want to get the ball rolling right now, build out an artist identity, an artist persona that is unique and that will make you stand out. And most importantly, that will help you build a cult following that is raging for you the way that these guys have a strong following. Guys, click the link down below. Limited time offer. This is probably going to be the last time you see this video, to be honest. This is not going to be available for too long. There's a limited space. So click the link down below so you can join this free webinar and start putting things into motion to build out a strong career. Let's get to it.